This is Amy. Welcome back to another series of tutorials on styling a basic web page. In this series, we'll be talking about positioning. In the first section, we'll add a background image to our web page, and we'll talk about positioning the background image and even tiling a background image. In the second section, we'll add some containers to our web page, and we'll talk about their margins, their paddings, and even some borders. And then finally, in the third section, we'll talk about navigating between pages in our website, and we'll talk about the properties font family and font size. So let's go ahead and let's get started. So the first thing we want to do is we want to tile an image to the background of our HTML page in the body section. If you remember, the body element or the body section of our HTML page is what is viewed here in the browser, within the viewport area of our browser. In our in our previous tutorials, we just set the background color of our body element within our HTML page to white. By default, all browsers will display the color white as the background. If we want to tile an image on the background of our HTML page, the first place we'll start will be in our style sheet. Originally, to change or to use the color white for our background of our web page, we used the property background. But since we're going to be using an image, we're going to change our property to background image. For today's tutorial, I have a tile ping that I'll be using for demonstration. And this is what it looks like. The original image was 323 by 285 pixels, and I just scaled it down to be around 25 by 25 pixels, a square measurement, an exact square measurement. You don't have to use a design like I did here. I created this in Photoshop. You can just use a plain color tile. Also, it doesn't have to be in the ping format. It can be a JPEG, a bitmap, or even a GIF. So back over in our style sheet, when we want to use a tile image, we're going to use the property background-image. And we're going to place the location of that image within the value of our background image property. And to do that, we'll just simply place URL, open parentheses, open quotation mark, the name of our image and its extension, whether it's a JPEG, bitmap, and then we'll close it with a closing quotation mark and a closing parentheses. And of course, we'll always include our semicolon right at the very end after using a property and a value within our formatting of an element within our style sheet. So by default, I know that Safari browser, Firefox browser, and Internet Explorer browser will automatically tile this image for me just by using the background image property and the location of our image. But before we view it in the browser, I wanted to mention, before, when we were linking things in our HTML page, we used href, if you'll remember, and we also used source to link something within our HTML page. Well, this is a new value that we'll be using in our style sheet to locate our images, and it's the URL property or value. If you try to use href or source within the style sheet, it won't work. So make sure to include that to link your image. So now we can go ahead and save our style sheet, and we can view that in the browser. And what it basically did is it took our small 25 by 25 pixel image, and it just tiled it, the browser forced it to tile back and forth all the way down our page. No matter how far down we scroll on our page, we'll have the same design. And no matter how far to the right that we scroll our page, we'll still have this design. So basically, that's all you'd have to do if you're just wanting to tile a basic image to your background page. This is all you would have to include. But what if we wanted our image to only tile from the top to the bottom? There we would have to go into our style sheet and we would use a different property called background repeat. Whenever we're talking about repeating a tile image for the background of our web page, there's two directions that the repeat will force the tile image. One would be horizontally from left to right, and the other would be vertically from top to bottom. If we wanted our image to repeat vertically, then we would use the repeat -y value. The y represents the vertical axis of our browser page from top to bottom, whereas the x is the horizontal value, and that represents from left to right. So if we just wanted our tile image to tile from the top to the bottom in a vertical manner on our web page, we would use repeat -y, and we'll save that and view it in our browser. Now by default, our browser is going to force the tile image to tile from the top to the bottom to the very far left. Well, what if we didn't want our image to be right up against the left side of our browser? What would we do? Well, there's another property that we can use alongside of these properties, and it is called the background position property. With the background position property, you can use two values. There's two values that you'll place within the background position property. You can either use a percentage for either one of these values, or you could use a length. Anytime that you want to make a comment within your style sheet, you can do it in this manner. Just simply use a /, two asterisk signs, your comment, and then close it with two asterisks and then a /. So if we wanted our tile image to tile vertically, but we don't want it right up to the left side of our page, and this is where our background position property is going to come in handy. We're going to go here in our horizontal value area for position, and we're just going to place, first we'll place a numeric or a length value of 50 pixels. And we'll save it and we'll view that in the browser. And now we can see that no longer by default will the browser force our tile image right up against the left side of our browser window, but it's actually taken our command of 50 pixels and brought it from the left towards the right and give us a nice little border here on the left side of our browser in a vertical direction. But what if we didn't want it to go vertically? We'd much rather have our border to go horizontally, about 50 pixels from the top, where it would be basically right along here. We would go back into our style sheet. We would change our value from the horizontal value to the vertical value, placing our length value here. But there's one more thing we would need to do. If you remember, the Y represents the vertical axis of our browser. But we don't want it to go vertical now. We want it to go horizontally. So we're going to need to change our repeat command from Y to X, which represents the horizontal axis of our browser. So looking at our code, we want the browser to take the background image of our tall ping, and we want it to repeat it horizontally, but we want to make sure that it repeats it horizontally 50 pixels from the top towards the bottom. This value represents from the left to the right. So we're going to set that at 0 because we want our tall ping to start at the very 0 point of the left side of our browser and tile horizontally all the way across our page, 50 pixels from the top. So let's go ahead and save that and view it in our browser. And now we have a nice little border running across the top of our page, 50 pixels from the top towards the bottom.